Hello. I'm going to do chapter 6 of Understanding the Culture. At least we're going to do our best. It's all on technology. Is technology neutral? Section 1. After my speech to a group in Singapore, a young man asked, "You said that there is a biblical worldview approach to everything. How does a biblical worldview apply to computer programming?" He assumed that things like computers are neutral because they can convey any idea without any bias toward one or another. Thus, they'd have no particular relationship with any worldview. As you'll see, I don't view technology as neutral. Technology moves us to think and act in certain ways and not in others. It always has an effect. Interestingly, the evening before this conversation, I had dinner with a businessman who shared about a company enabling people in developing countries to use text messaging to trade cell phone minutes with one another. Because of this simple feature, cell phone minutes essentially became an alternate form of currency in many countries. People who live hours away from the nearest bank are able to save minutes and use them to make purchases and even start businesses. For those typically at risk of being stolen from or taken advantage of, it's an alternative way to get ahead. This simple innovation has been helpful for millions of people, and yet there are even larger implications. Much of the world's population lives in countries where corrupt leaders fuel their power by printing more money, which drives down the value of the currency and forces people to live day to day, unable to save for the future. After all, who wants to save money when that money might be worthless by next week? For people in countries stuck with corrupt leaders, cell phone minutes provide a way to avoid the unstable national currency. People can move beyond just staying alive and actually trade without government interference. They can accumulate capital, protect their investments, and exercise their God-given creativity with less help from the international aid community. So, I explained to this young man, while technology is not neutral and it can be used for good or ill, there is definitely a way to develop technology that reflects a biblical worldview. You can use it to help people better bear God's image. Nearly everyone in the world benefits from technology. Technology makes our lives easier, safer, more comfortable, and more secure. Yet an uncritical acceptance of technology is dangerous. Technology isn't neutral. It changes our lives in bad ways as well as good ones. On a large scale, easy access to the internet makes our financial and military systems vulnerable to cyber attack. On a personal level, the technology that enables parents to conceive also introduces a host of questions about cloning, leftover embryos, designer babies, and surrogacy. Technology can prolong life, but also brings up questions about end-of-life intervention. When it comes to technology, what is possible isn't the same as what is good. Technology can't answer questions like, to what degree and under what circumstances should we interfere with life and death? And should living as long as possible be our top value? Having more information doesn't necessarily make us wiser, and wisdom, not just knowledge, should be our goal. The late theologian Howard Hendricks often quoted these words, "When God measures a man, he puts the tape around the heart, not the head." Unfortunately, cultures come to see what is possible as what is expected. But if we believe we're justified in using any technology we have to its greatest extent, then our unquestioned assumptions about technology shape our view of just about everything else. As we'll see, our assumptions about technology affect our daily habits and how we use time. They affect how we relate to others when we're with them, and how we use our downtime. They affect how we take in and use information. Ultimately, our assumptions about technology affect the values we pass on to the next generation. Despite its critical importance, technology is so much part of our lives that its impact can seem invisible. Indeed, technology itself is often invisible. We have to intentionally examine what it is and how it works in our lives. We'll begin by looking at what the problem is, and then we'll discuss why and how Christians should care about technology. And finally, we'll propose ways to be culture shapers based on a biblical worldview when it comes to the realm of technology. Section 2, the benefits and drawbacks of technology. So first, what is technology? The word technology comes from the Greek word techne for art or craft. Technologia, something like that, is a discourse about or systematic treatment of an art or technique. When we focus on the techniques of something, for example, the techniques of persuasion, we're focusing on how we're persuading others, not what we're persuading them to do. It's important to understand the breadth of this definition. If technology is focused on technique or how we do what we do, then technology isn't just about our iPhones. It's also about the air conditioning unit we forgot is quietly humming in the background, the processes that produce the fabric in the clothes we're wearing, the design of the chairs we're sitting on, and even the colors and graphics of the billboards, vehicles, websites, and media advertisements calling for our attention. Technology has always been a part of human life. Adam and Eve's son Cain developed techniques for growing crops, while their son Abel developed techniques for raising sheep. The biblical description of Noah's Ark offers a stunning example of technology. Roman aqueducts, still standing today, are a fascinating example of engineering technology. Yet it wasn't until the Middle Ages in Europe that technological growth became focused on making work easier and more productive. For example, the first water wheels appeared in the 600s in Irish monasteries. Initially used for grinding grain, water wheels were quickly adapted to a wide range of additional tasks: cleaning newly woven cloth, powering bellows and trip hammers in blacksmith shops, sawing lumber, and making paper. In areas without easy access to rivers, windmills were designed to do the same tasks. Other technological innovations in the Middle Ages included the heavy-wheeled plow, the horseshoe, the horse collar, the scythe, the chimney, the blast furnace, the suction pump, the grinding wheel, the wheelbarrow, the horizontal loom, the cog, the compass, the hourglass, the mechanical clock, eyeglasses, soap, the wine press, and plate armor. Many of these were invented specifically to improve work conditions for laborers. Because technology is such a broad topic, we need a way to narrow our discussion. So in this chapter, we'll focus on the ever-present, urgent, and personal technology in our lives: smartphones and other devices, search engines, apps, and the internet. The broad term for this is information technology, which communication professor Quentin Schultz defines as all computer-based technologies that enable people to collect, store, access, and exchange information of any kind, including personal messages communicated via the internet. In discussing information technology, we must also address the cyber culture it generates. This cyber culture daily expands to become a larger and larger part of culture itself. When I first tried to find figures for this book, I found an infographic that said that every passing minute, 204,166,667 email messages were sent. YouTube users uploaded 48 hours of new video. Twitter users sent more than 100,000 tweets, and Instagram users shared 3,600 new photos. There's no way to have the most up-to-date figures in a book like this, but I think it's safe to say that the numbers are even higher now. As information technology becomes a bigger part of our overall culture, it reveals a good side and a not-so-good side. The good side? Many of our gadgets, innovations, and inventions are great gifts. Information technology has improved medical care, lowered the cost of necessary goods, improved security, increased comfort, and made it possible for people to accomplish more and know more in less time, at less expense, and with less back-breaking labor. Personally, information technology has profoundly changed the way I work. The shift was gradual. In the early 90s, my graduate school began encouraging students to use email to share ideas with a vast network of scholars. Though initially I mainly used it to correspond with my long-distance girlfriend, soon the internet was putting hard-to-find information at my fingertips, reuniting me with long-lost acquaintances and facilitating daily interaction with people around the globe. Information technology drove down the cost of communication for several businesses I started. Whereas I initially sent a paper newsletter to thousands of people at a cost of thousands of dollars a month, the internet made it possible to communicate with 10 times as many people for just a few dollars a month. Today, the cost of delivering information is so low that most of us expect information to be both free and fast. Not long ago, people didn't expect free shipping or 2-day delivery. Now we can often instantly download what we purchase from the internet or even use 3D printers to make a product we once had to order. These are all benefits of rapid technological development. Information technology has taken my teaching to a new level as well. Students interact through webinars and chat rooms. In the leadership classes I teach, I often have 1,000 students a year who watch lectures online, have their papers graded and questions answered by a facilitator on the internet, and join me for Q&A webinars. Moreover, text messaging, Voxer, Snapchat, FaceTime, and other communication tools are evolving so rapidly that the list is almost outdated even as I write it. With these applications, or apps, I can stay in touch with my family and staff in ways that were nearly impossible just a few years ago. Finally, technology may be useful in helping students learn. Research has found a positive relationship between learning and technology. Many of you are reading this book right now using an e-reader, which makes information as easy to understand as reading something in print and can increase your ability to apply what you're learning. Just a minute. Hey, Brett. Yeah? You're going to have to talk softly. Sorry. You might hear him occasionally. It's no big deal. The not-so-good side of technology. And yet, all is not well. Information technology seems as if it can provide a miracle cure for our problems, but there are downsides. First, too much information can be distracting. For example, as of 2009, the cost of information overload and interruption to people's work days, such as looking at the latest video they've been forwarded, or checking out someone's Twitter feed, was around $900 billion in lost productivity. Doubtless, it's even more now. In addition, most states have passed laws against texting and driving because distracted driving kills thousands and injures hundreds of thousands each year. The misuse of technology isn't the only thing that distracts us, however. Sometimes even its proper use can distract us. One study found that even though students took more notes when they typed them on a laptop, they actually remembered less than when they took notes by hand. Researchers speculated that since most people can't write as fast as they type, writing notes by hand forces them to listen more carefully and summarize what they're hearing. This heavy mental lifting helps them understand and remember what they're hearing. So, while technology can help reading in some cases, when people use it to take notes, it seems to detract from learning. Second, information technology can hurt the depth of communication. This is not going to work, is it? Hold on just a minute. Brett.
Yeah?
Buddy.
I'm sorry.
Is there any way that you can go into the bedroom?
No. Yes, I can go into the bedroom.
Why don't you do that, and then you can shut that other door, and then you don't have to be quiet. Thank you.
Okay.
Second.
Walk into my mom.
Information technology can hurt the depth of communication. Sorry, I already read that. Many people seem to have lost the ability to talk face to face. Cleverly worded social media posts and edited photographs have replaced transparency and vulnerability. Text messaging allows more frequent communication with friends and family, but the messages are usually shorter and less substantive. Once we're used to short, shallow, fast messages, we have less tolerance for in-depth communication. It's common to see people ignore everyone in their actual physical surroundings because they're so focused on trivial communication with those at a distance. In 2015, one man died after walking off a cliff while looking at his smartphone. Third, information technology can make us more narrow-minded. While information technology makes it theoretically possible to acquire knowledge about a lot of things, it also makes it possible to listen to only the music we're interested in, watch only programs that directly relate to our interests, and communicate only with people when and if we want to. Information technology doesn't create intolerance, it exposes it and enables it. It gives us the illusion that we're in control of the world and don't have to bother with the inconvenience of different views of people. It makes us feel that it's okay to treat others rudely or even shut them out completely. And finally, there is the largest problem of all. Access to technology 24/7 steals innocence by constantly exposing us to degrading, demeaning, perverse content. Technology has enabled the incredible growth of pornography, exploitation, the hookup culture, and the sex trafficking industry. What we used to find disgusting just seems normal now. It's sad. We'll discuss these problems and the overall sexual brokenness in our modern culture in Chapter 9. In short, here's the risk with technology. If we fail to cultivate habits of the heart, such as discernment, moderation, wisdom, humility, authenticity, and diversity, we risk losing a sense of what it means to bear God's image well, and in the process lose sight of what the good life is and what it means to be human. Technology doesn't make us do anything, but it can seduce us away from the path that leads to God's best for our lives. Let's take a closer look at how technology tempts us. Respected Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT professor and psychoanalyst Sherry Turkle has been studying technology's effects on people for more than 30 years. My concerns have grown, she writes. These days, insecure in our relationships and anxious about intimacy, we look to technology for ways to be in relationships and protect ourselves from them at the same time. Our machine dream, she says, is to be never alone but always in control. Turkle's book, Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other, tells two stories. Today's story of the network, with its promise to give us more control over human relationships, and tomorrow's story of sociable robots, which promise relationships where we will be in control, even if that means not being in relationships at all. Technology's promise of putting us fully in control of a life that is easier, more productive, and more connected must be tempered by an understanding of who we are and how we were created primarily for the purpose of loving God and our neighbors. Here are some of the temptations of technology that research has revealed. 1. Information technology tempts us to lose focus. Because so many technologies are available to us all of the time, it's easy to find ourselves working, texting, surfing the internet, listening to music, and trying to pay attention to a conversation all at the same time. Nearly 1/3 of 7th to 12th graders say they multitask most of the time by simultaneously doing homework, watching TV, sending instant messages, talking on the phone, surfing the web, and listening to music. Not only can multitasking be physically dangerous, as in the case of texting while driving, but it can also be relationally damaging, such as when a person develops a pattern of texting in the presence of others. Technology tempts us to think that elsewhere is a better place, and others would be better companions than the ones we're with. Studies now show that although we think multitasking makes us more efficient, the opposite is true. Multitaskers don't perform as well on any of the tasks they're trying to do simultaneously as they do when they give focused attention to each task individually. It takes more effort than we realize to switch productively from one task to another, and yet the stimulation of feeling productive and clever produces neurochemicals that offer a sort of high that deceives us into thinking we're productive. This chemical response actually produces a physical craving for the kind of stimulation multitasking gives us. Our brains actually rewire to require this sort of craving. Turkle says, as we try to reclaim our concentration, we are literally at war with ourselves. Ultimately, we find it difficult to pay attention to anything at all because we're multitasking in our minds. Writer Linda Stone calls this continuous partial attention, noting that we are so accessible, we're inaccessible. 2. Information technology tempts us to isolate ourselves. Though on the surface technology seems to facilitate communication, it can actually divide us by helping us avoid those who aren't like us. As psychologist Kathy Koch often points out, we don't even have channels and we don't even have to ask other people questions. We can just ask Siri or Google. The vast array of television channels and online forums target specific audiences and make it possible for us to hear from and interact with only those who have the exact same interests we do. Granted, it's a welcome relief to feel understood by people who are like us and to avoid the stress of communicating with those who aren't, but this can actually impoverish us. Consider the way it changes our everyday interactions. Rather than shopping at the corner market, people roam the aisles of 24-hour megastores, hardly making eye contact with others, or shop online in the comfort of their own homes. People sit with others in close physical proximity, but their attention is entirely on the little screens in front of them, rather than on one another. They can also stay home from church, but watch it on the internet and enjoy simulcast events at home rather than in a crowded church or theater where they might have to talk with people. Neighbors move from front porch to the back deck, from the living room to the TV room. Music becomes a means of isolating rather than uniting people. And special interest groups and political groups stop cooperating for the common good and devolve into the forums of vicious attacks. Ain't that the truth? How long can good people survive this level of fragmentation? How long can a good culture survive it? The cry of the populace is, "Leave me alone." Perhaps the ultimate hell is that their wish will be granted. One wonders whether the collapse of our civilization will occur not through an explosive conflict, but through a deafening silence. We'll all just walk away, alone. Technology does make some kinds of connections stronger. According to sociologists, weak ties, connections between people who are acquaintances or second-level contacts, friends of friends, or associates of family members, explain all sorts of things, from how people get job referrals to why they feel they have mysterious illnesses. Information technology increases our number of weak ties. Consider, for instance, the number of Facebook friends you have versus the number of actual friends you have. But technology claims so much of our time and attention for weak tie relationships that it's harder today to maintain strong tie relationships with family and close friends. In fact, we may even lose the ability to have the kind of interactions that keep strong tie relationships strong. For instance, studies show that the internet and cell phones help us communicate more frequently with those we care about most, but they also tend to lower the probability of face-to-face visits in the home. Ironically, information technology seems to improve communication with people who aren't central to our lives, but damage communication with those who truly are central, such as loved ones and those in our communities. Barry Wellman and his colleagues even suggest that having multiple computers in the home interferes with family relationships, creating post-familial families, where family members interact with their devices rather than with each other. 3. Information technology tempts us to be superficial. God designed person-to-person communication to be profoundly meaningful. We were made to connect with others and with God Himself. Every aspect of our bodies and minds is involved. The spoken word is directly linked to our breathing, gestures, posture, and physical closeness. In some ways, the spoken word is even more intimate than physical contact because physical contact is exterior to exterior, whereas human communication is interior to interior, from one heart and mind to another. We were wired for relational intimacy. Communication technology permits us to observe more and communicate less. Our communication ability is anemic, even though technology offers a remedy. Do words fail you? You can borrow some clever lines from a movie or song, or repost a meme expressing thoughts with which you agree. A few years ago, I participated in a documentary about media addiction called Captivated. Interviewed in the film was Emory University professor Mark Bauerlein, whose confrontationally titled book, The Dumbest Generation, makes the case that growing wealth and technological advancement have stunned intellectual growth. Bauerlein observes that all the occasions and equipment for learning are in place, but people use them for other purposes. No cohort in human history has experienced so many technological enhancements and yielded so little mental progress. Superficiality erodes the deeper historical connection that guides our interactions and informs our collective consciousness. Like hikers lost in a snowstorm, we find ourselves disoriented by a blizzard of information. Librarian of Congress James Billington has noted that if we lose our sense of the past, we lose a sense of who we are to a world of motion without memory, which is one of the clinical definitions of insanity. Superficiality also changes our relationships with others. As Sherry Turkle says of the networking made possible by information and technology, networked we are together, but so lessened are our expectations of each other that we can feel utterly alone. We risk seeing others only as objects to be assessed for the parts we find useful, comforting, or amusing. 4. Informational technology tempts us to give in to evil. Deception is one kind of evil that new technology has made more common. Gina Frost of Boston University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology found that about 20% of online daters admit to deception. When asked, however, how many other online daters they thought were lying, an interviewing tactic that probably gets closer to the truth about their own behavior as well as the behavior of others, that number jumped to 90%. But there is an even deeper evil still, technology as an object of worship. Humans have always been tempted to believe that technology will save us. Consider this over-the-top assessment from secular humanist philosopher Paul Kurtz. We have virtually conquered the planet, explored the moon, overcome the natural limits of travel and communication. We stand at the dawn of a new age. Using technology wisely, we can control our environment, conquer poverty, markedly reduce disease, extend our lifespan, significantly modify our behavior, alter the course of human evolution and cultural development, unlock vast new powers, and provide humankind with unparalleled opportunity for achieving an abundant and meaningful life. Some devotees of technology seem almost religious in their enthusiasm. In at least one case, this devotion has morphed into an actual religion called Terasem. The founders of Terasem is Martine Rothblatt, a corporate pioneer who founded Sirius XM satellite radio in 1990. Rothblatt believes that humans can secure immortality by uploading and storing mind files until robot technology advances sufficiently to recreate personal consciousness. By downloading their mind files into robots, people will be able to live forever, even after they're dead. Lorraine Rhodes, who runs TerraSem's educational nonprofit, admits some people call it the rapture of the nerds. But Rothblatt is deadly serious. For us, she says, God is in the making. By our collective efforts to make technology ever more omnipresent, omnipotent, and ethical, when we can joyfully all experience techno-immortality, then God is complete. If such enthusiastic worship of technology leaves you feeling bewildered, you're not alone. Based on the Bible's teachings about the sin nature, you might expect technology to feed humankind's destructive tendencies as well as its noble ones, and it has. The Nazis were among IBM's first customers, using rudimentary computers to streamline their genocidal plans. Nuclear research promised energy in abundance, but resulted in bombs powerful enough to obliterate all living things. Movies that entice the viewer with the promise of relationship also generate innocence-stealing lust. Chemical substances that promise bliss rob addicts of life purpose. Industry pioneers fantasized that communication technology would lead to global harmony. The reality, however, isn't so pretty. Nations the world over have used technology to communicate dehumanizing messages such as Jews are not persons, babies are not persons, and those who resist communism are not persons. The consequences? According to historian R.J. Rummel, almost 170 million persons were killed at the whim of governments in the first 88 years of the 20th century. Technology manufactures the vehicle and hands humanity the keys. If the past is any guide to the future, we may be careening toward our own demise. We thought technology would accelerate wisdom and caring, but what if it actually destroys itself and us in the process? Section 3, why should Christians care? It's one thing to say that technology leads to problems. It's another to think that Christians should have a greater concern about this than other people. I think they should, and in the balance of this chapter, I hope to show why. Here are 5 reasons Christians as culture shapers ought to lead the way in calling for deeper thinking about technology's potential and pitfalls. 1. The Christian worldview unmasks technology's illusion of neutrality. Technology is never passive. It does things, but it also undoes other things. According to Neil Postman, author of the best-selling and brilliantly named book on technology, Amusing Ourselves to Death, new technologies alter the structure of our interests, the things we think about. They alter the character of our symbols, the things we think with, and they alter the nature of community, the arena in which thoughts develop. As Sherry Turkle puts it, we make our technologies and they, in turn, make and shape us. Many people argue that technology is passive. It isn't good or bad, it just is. Postman disagreed. He said that embedded in every tool is an ideological bias, a predisposition to construct the world as one thing rather than another, to value one thing over another, to amplify one sense or skill or attitude more loudly than another. Even as simple a technology as a stethoscope proclaims, medicine is about disease, not the patient. And what the patient knows is untrustworthy. What the machine knows is reliable. A stethoscope is just a tool that enables doctors to gather information and diagnose disease, and yet it generates a way of thinking about people and about the world. It redefines the way people see themselves and the power of medicine. Technology can lead to either good or bad changes, or both at the same time, but technology is never neutral. French philosopher Jacques Ellul went even further. He suggested in his prophetic 1954 book, The Technological Society, that technology develops its own internal logic to serve its own needs, and when we submit to it rather than master it, we do so at our own peril. Technology, in its pretense of neutrality, tends to eliminate moral considerations altogether. Technology is known by its refusal to tolerate moral judgments. He said it is absolutely independent of them and eliminates them from its domain. Technology never observes the distinction between moral and immoral use. Technology alters our assumptions about what is possible and valuable. It makes arguments about what is in the human interest and promises to reshape us with a focus on bearing God's image and being reshaped into the image of His Son, Jesus Christ. Christians can provide the moral core that distinguishes between a society that uses technology wisely and one that doesn't. 2. The Christian worldview reminds us that we are stewards of creation, not masters of it, as the use of technology sometimes lead us to believe. Technology causes us to see creation as an appliance to be used, rather than a resource to be stewarded. Again, it isn't that technology is all bad. As Neil Postman noted, technology is both a friend that makes life easier, cleaner, and longer, and an enemy that threatens to destroy our humanity by creating a culture without a moral foundation and undermining certain mental processes and social relations that make life worth living. Technology becomes an enemy of creation when we develop what Quentin Schultz calls information-intensive, technique-oriented habits that shape our values. These habits lead us to think that we're clever enough to impose our will on creation and solve every problem. The problem isn't that technology adds to our values in a negative way, but that it changes them altogether by encouraging us to view ourselves, others, and the world around us as instruments to do our bidding. Non-instrumental values such as moderation, discernment, and humility become things to be used rather than states to aspire to for their own sake. Though we would never say it aloud, we start thinking things like, how can I show myself to be humble so I can get what I want? How can I be friendly so I can get what I want? And how can I be neighborly so I can get what I want? Moreover, information technology enables us to believe that our relationship with the world has little to do with our physical surroundings. After a while, the virtual world seems to us to be the real one, while the real world becomes virtually irrelevant. Technology has also changed our relationship to time and space. Time-saving devices like smartphones were supposed to buy us time, but instead they've erased its value. It's not that we can't get away from our work, it's that technology has blurred the distinction between work and leisure. Ultimately, as Sherry Turkle puts it, all the time in the world is not enough. Unless we're careful, technology can encourage us to think of creation not as something we steward, but as something to be taken from, used, and made into our own image. The Christian worldview helps us restore balance by reminding us that we are here to serve God by stewarding creation, not to become God by mastering it. Number 3, the Christian worldview helps redeem the use of technology. In many ways, relating to technology is the defining concern of our times. In Alone Together, Sherry Turkle describes a disturbing situation in which an elderly woman became so engrossed with a robot doll called My Real Baby that she started ignoring her 2-year-old great-granddaughter. While the young girl clamored for attention, the woman cradled the robot and spoke to it, saying things like, "Sweetie, you are my sweetie pie. Yes, you are." Frankly, Turkle's description of the encounter is creepy. While dolls may be helpful for comforting ill children or adults with diseases like dementia, this elderly woman seemed to have lost track of what was real and what wasn't. But we're guilty too. We increasingly find it difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is simulated. For example, we experience real emotions when watching movies we know to be scripted, staged, lighted, acted, and edited. This is a startling change for our society. As Turkle puts it, the meaning of the computer presence in people's lives today is very different from what most expected in the late 1970s. We are moving from a modernist culture of calculation toward a postmodernist culture of simulation. In the past, Christians intentionally engaged with the technologies of their day in ways that both reflected a Christian worldview and made life better for the whole culture. Based on the belief that Adam and Eve were given responsibilities prior to the fall, work was seen not as a necessary evil but as a positive good. But after the fall, work became drudgery. The monastic leaders we talked about in chapter 3 responded to work's drudgery by arguing that if an animal could do it rather than a human, it should. And if a machine could do it, even better. Eliminating repetitive, mindless work allows humans to focus on higher pursuits. Thus, many early monasteries became nurseries for technological innovation. There is a stark difference between the Christian worldview and other worldviews during this fertile period of imagination. Many other cultures actually had more advanced technology, but the elites used it as a plaything rather than a way to make the lives of everyday people better. A Christian worldview grapples with what to do not only with the technology we have, but also with what the technology we have does to us. Both issues are important. We cannot use technology to live better lives unless we have a clear sense of what it means to live well. 4. The Christian worldview helps restore the humanity that technology tends to diminish. Neil Postman identified 3 types of culture that engage with technology. The first type is a tool-using cultures, those that invented tools to make life easier, for example, windmills, or to carry political or religious meaning, like cathedrals. The second level is technocracies, cultures in which non-integrated tools such as the mechanical clock or the printing press became central to thought in society. The third level is technopolies. These societies that submit all forms of cultural life to the sovereignty of technique and technology. Our society, Postman believed, is a technopoly. The technopoly story is without a moral center, he wrote. It puts in its place efficiency, interest, and economic advance. In a technopoly, talk of sin and evil, or even transcendent good, gives way to the theology of expertise. People stop asking why and focus only on how. A technopoly thinks of human value based on what people can do, rather than who they are. Its adherents struggle to answer the ultimate questions in life, such as where we came from, who we are, what is right and wrong, what is the purpose of life, and where we're going both as a society and beyond this life. Technopoly also changes our personal habits in ways that diminish our sense of self. Who are you when no one is texting you? Sometimes when I've been on a long flight, I wonder whether anyone needed me during those 2 quiet hours. Did anyone text? Did anyone email? Did anyone respond to my Facebook post? If they didn't, do I still exist as a relevant person? After a while, we become uncomfortable without our devices. One 13-year-old told CNN, "When I get my phone taken away, I feel kind of naked." People need to be connected in order to feel like themselves. The answer to technopoly is to hit the reset button and begin seeing one another once again as persons rather than as a bundle of economic interests whose value is in how efficiently we convert human ingenuity into practical beliefs. Our value to God and people doesn't change based on whether people in cyberspace need us. We literally need to put down our devices, look others in the eye, and do unto them as we would want them to do unto us. This is a desperately needed message. 5. The Christian worldview confronts technology's dumbing down effect on communication and community. Have you ever been in a room where 2 people are so into each other, whispering and giggling together that they totally ignore everyone around them? That's what it's like to others when we're engaged with a handheld device. I remember visiting a college campus in the South where on long walks between buildings, all the people I passed, and there were dozens of them, were either listening to music or looking at their devices. Ironically, promoters of that university like to talk about their strong community. What I experienced, though, was a bunch of people plugged in but tuned out. As strong a tradition as Southern hospitality is, it couldn't withstand the pressure of obsessive technological connection. God, on the other hand, is all about relationship. He is Trinity, one God made manifest in three persons, God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. This relationship in the Godhead closely relates to how we ought to act in the world. Matthew 28:19 says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." As God's image bearers, we too are built for relationship. But in a technological society, environment is decoupled from awareness, and inhabitants are encouraged to engage or disengage as they wish. We've talked about how technology hampers our relationships with those in our surrounding environment, but it also hampers our relationships with the weak tie contacts we're paying so much attention to on our smartphones. We text others, and like a genie, we make them appear on command. If they don't appear, we impatiently text someone else. Our attitude is, "Are you paying attention to me? If not, then I'm not paying attention to you either." Strictly speaking, our communication isn't the cause of this relational breakdown. Yet, as we saw earlier, technology redefines the boundaries of what is acceptable public behavior. Says Sherry Turkle, "In every era, certain ways of relating come to feel natural. In our time, if we can be continually in touch, needing to be continually in touch does not seem a problem or a pathology, but an accommodation to what technology affords. It becomes the norm. Technology facilitates self-centeredness and discourages other-centeredness. A study of more than 14,000 college students over the past 30 years has shown a dramatic decline in empathy, corresponding with the rise in information technology. Today's college students are significantly less likely than those from 30 years ago to say that it's valuable to understand other people's feelings. A selfie isn't just a way of taking a picture, it's a cultural movement in which each person thinks the world revolves around him or herself. Part of our lack of empathy may be self-protective. Who hasn't been in a conversation that was interrupted by one participant stopping to reply to a text message? On a handful of occasions, I found myself saying, "I have a call coming through from someone I promised to talk to," and the other person replied, "Of course, I understand." Earlier in my life, stopping one conversation to begin another would have been viewed as rude. Now we see it as rude to oppose it. To use Turkle's memorable phrase, mobile technology has made each of us pausable. We often choose to ignore our immediate surroundings, to pay attention to what our technology demands of us. By doing so, we're actually alone much of the time we're together. In fact, we become disoriented about what it means to be alone and what it means to be together in the first place. Obi-Wan Kenobi told Luke Skywalker, "Use the Force." God in Star Wars is a force to manipulate. The Bible's worldview couldn't be more different. According to the Bible, God is a person who loves all the persons he has created. We use things. We love people. Will we use technology to serve the people God loves or to replace them? In times like these, a biblical worldview is more important than ever. Section 4. What should a Christian do? Information technology brings up some big questions. Christians ought to care, but what should we do differently? Certainly, we should be filled with hope because Christ has won the victory over sin. We should look expectantly to the future, knowing that Christ's kingdom will have no end. But in a world that doesn't see technology as a problem, how do we live wisely, let alone search for a solution? Here are 4 ideas. 1. Bear God's image as a restorer. In Genesis 1:1, we learn that God is creation's architect and artist. According to medieval theologian Hugh of St. Victor, as God's image bearers, humans need technological knowledge just as much as they need theology, math, physics, economics, ethics, and politics. We see very little of this kind of thinking in cultures that didn't have a similar Christian tradition. Says Vishal Mangawaldi, Asia and Africa did not lack ability, but ability alone does not produce liberating technology. Jesus said that people are like sheep in need of good shepherds. Without shepherds, slavery will remain the norm. From the women in Jinja to the untouchables in India, non-biblical cultures need more than technology. They need a philosophy that values people. As we've already seen, a biblical worldview enabled people in the Middle Ages to improve technologies, make the lot of workers better, and make goods more readily available. A desire to improve the lot of workers based on a biblical worldview was behind many inventions that changed the world, including the invention and improvement of the steam engine by Thomas Newcomen, a lay pastor who tried to help the workers in his congregation, and James Watt, a Scottish Presbyterian. We can bear God's image today by creating technologies that help restore people to their image-bearing capacity. We can make life better for people, much as the company we talked about at the beginning of this chapter transformed life in developing countries through software that enables people to use cell phone minutes as a form of currency. 2. Bear God's image as a renewer. James K. A. Smith, in his book Desiring the Kingdom, says we are shaped more by our loves than by our ideas. According to Smith, our love is aimed from the fulcrum of our desire, the habits that constitute our character, our core identity, and the way our love or desire gets aimed in specific directions is through practices that shape, mold, and direct our love. When Smith speaks of practices that shape our love, he is referring to things we can regularly do to grow by renewing our deepest beliefs about God and our calling in the world. Craig Dykstra says in Growing in the Life of Faith, Christian practices are means of grace, the human places in which and through God's people come to faith and grow in maturity in the life of faith. Over the centuries, Christians have developed such practices as worshiping God and praying together, telling the Bible story, confessing his sins, giving liberally, suffering together, and celebrating holidays. These practices and others, such as the art of hospitality, help form us into virtuous men and women whose foundation is unshaken by rapid change. Consider how the disciplines in the following list can help us move away from being self-concerned, comfort-driven, stressed-out consumers to being producers of the good, true, and beautiful. Confession. If reading this chapter hasn't caused you to feel convicted about your technology use, start over. There is hardly a person alive who isn't tempted to worship the idol of technology. We cannot be restored to God without first repenting of our habit of letting other gods take his place. To have true worship, we must give up false worship. Prayer is a conversation with God. When we lose our ability to converse with other people, our prayer life is undoubtedly suffers. Prayer isn't talking aloud to ourselves. It isn't superficial or about trying to compel God to give us what we want. True prayer helps us let go of the illusion that we're in control, lament our fallenness, ask God to give us what we need to accomplish his will through Jesus Christ, and express thankfulness for his good gifts. Through prayer, we can become more humble, balanced, and focused on others. Sabbaths. On the seventh day of creation, God rested. Taking a Sabbath rest from our devices reminds us that technology cannot replace basic habits like sleep, a healthy diet, and exercise. Interestingly, the latest research confirms the wisdom of God's call to rest. John Jonides, a professor of psychology and neuroscience, says that exposure to softly fascinating environments, such as an engagement with the natural world, can lead to improved working memory and attention. Educational learning expert Kevin Washburn summarizes this finding by saying, when students seem mentally tired, a walk outside may be the best instructional activity. God's unexpected invitation to rest helps us remember that he, not our constant access to technology, sustains us. Sabbath keeping isn't a duty. It's a practice full of quiet reflection, delight, renewal, and whimsy. Calendar keeping. For much of the church's history and in many Christian traditions today, the people of God have together recognized a different orientation to time. Two common Greek words for time in the New Testament are chronos, which refers to clock time, and kairos, which refers to opportunity time. Kairos cannot be measured. It is always now. Make the most of every kairos, the Apostle Paul wrote. In God's economy, temporal minutes are valuable because they're potential moments of eternal significance. The church calendar marks many holidays or holy days and seasons such as Advent, Lent, and Easter to provide the opportunity of stepping away from clock time to experience the rhythms of eternity. Through these observances, we can focus on what is most important and be renewed through waiting, listening, and hoping. Bear God's image as a relator. As we've seen, God is personal and relational. He is an eternal relationship. He is in an eternal relationship within himself through the Trinity. From the beginning, he has related with his image bearers, even walking with Adam and Eve in the garden. Right from the beginning of creation, God was revealed to be Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God. He is not only the creator God, Elohim, he's also the personal God of Israel, Yahweh, the maker of covenants and the rescuer of his people. John 1:1 tells us, in the beginning was the Word. God is a personal God. He shows up. He's clear. He's direct. God also communicates with us by listening. In conversations recorded in the Bible, God asked questions and listened as people spoke to him. In the Gospels, Jesus asked hundreds of questions. As God's image bearers, we too can use words to create, encourage, build community, and reach out to others, including those isolated by the fallout of an information technology. To do this, we must bury lying, gossip, and verbal abuse and resurrect words of blessing, grace, and hope. Proverbs 15:23 says, "To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is." As image bearers, we need to ask whether our technology use is deepening our connection with others or keeping it at a surface level. We also need to ask whether we're using technology in a way that keeps the spotlight on God's truth. Randall Niles is an attorney and educator who co-founded allaboutgod.com. He believes that Christians can change their orientation to information technology by using it to communicate worthy messages. Whether we like it or not, social networks and other media tools will play a crucial role in the delivery of spiritual information, both true and deception. If we're not engaged in the online marketplace of spiritual ideas, we will miss one of the greatest opportunities for the Great Commission. Spreading truth is something Christians have used technology to do since at least the time of Johann Gutenberg, who, as we discussed earlier, invented movable type and the printing press out of an explicit desire to spread knowledge of the Bible. Here are a few specific ways we can bear God's image as relators. Awareness. We can refuse to let technology get in the way of being aware of other people and their thoughts and needs. Technology should never get in the way of true friendship. Friendship is more than hanging out. It's mutual caring, being another's confidant by choice. In his best-selling book, The Friendship Factor, Alan Loy McGinnis says that friendship is the springboard to every other love. Alliances. Navigating between complete acceptance of information technology and complete rejection of it is difficult. There are two ways we can err, and each reflects the consequences of sin for relationships. First, we can err through sins of commission, engaging in ridicule, lying, and gossip. Second, we can err through sins of omission, failing to listen when we ought to, failing to speak as we should, or tuning others out instead of offering hope and encouragement. Says Quentin Schultz, with our sins of omission and of commission, we are symbolic predators in the communication jungles of a fallen world. Thus, we cannot succeed alone. If you haven't already done so, consider forming an alliance of friends to read relevant scriptures, or a book about life in modern society, such as Neil Postman's Technopoly, or Morva Dawn's Unfettered Hope. Discuss, pray together, commit to better bearing God's image in relation to what you study. Accountability. We need accountability. Sadly, technology can accelerate our fallenness. It tempts us to waste time on superficial pursuits, or worse, to explore pornography or other evils that destroy our innocence and cause severe relational decay. We need others, parents, teachers, mentors, grandparents, siblings, friends, to be honest with us about our own technological practices. Are we using technology to distract ourselves from worthier pursuits? Are we using technology to avoid reality or hide from inconvenience? Give a handful of trusted people permission to be honest with you about what they see, and receive their critiques with a humble spirit and gracious attitude, striving not to be quick to defend yourself, but quick to listen. 4. Bear God's image as a repairer. When God completed creation, he announced it as very good. As a free, wise, moral agent, God knows what is right and good. Indeed, his nature is the very definition of good. Scripture shows him to be gracious and merciful, taking care of the needs of human beings even after they transgressed his law. God, in his mercy, is also focused on repairing what was broken in the fall. Through Christ's death on the cross, God repaired our broken relationship with him. In Amos's prophecy about God's people returning to him, Amos referred to God as the repairer of breaches. God encourages his people to be repairers as well. When the enemies of Israel destroyed Jerusalem's walls, God sent the prophet Nehemiah to oversee the repairs so the people would no longer live in disgrace. In addition to repairing broken walls, we're also called to repair broken relationships. Here are some steps we can take to reflect God's image as repairers. We must actively repair the lack of discernment that traps us in an unwise use of technology. Once when I took my son on a cross-country airline flight, an inappropriate video came on the screen. I asked my son to avert his gaze, but after a few moments he blurted, "I just can't keep my eyes from looking at it." The images were riveting. They were also poisoning our souls. When I realized that the way our family used technology was damaging our souls, I began an ongoing process of repairing that damage. That's why we use accountability programs such as Covenant Eyes and Utc Ch to help us avoid impure content. Each program sends reports of our online activity to trusted mentors, offering us the opportunity to engage in soul repair work and commit to remaining whole. Knowing how often we make bad decisions in our brokenness also encourages us to take preventive measures, such as reading pluggedin.com reviews to decide what to watch and listen to. As God's image bearers, each of us must learn to use discernment. We must actively repair the thoughtlessness that makes our technology use destructive. This requires asking hard questions like these. What does this technology undo? Is it worth undoing? What does this technology free us from? Is that something from which we should be set free? In what ways does this technology bring us closer together or distance us from one another? What does this technology seem to suggest humans are for? How does this technology affect how I think of myself? The point of these questions isn't to eliminate our need for thoughtfulness, but to require it. Repairing the damage from technology is hard work, and each of us has much more to repair than we probably imagine we do. The most important question to ask ourselves before adopting any new technology is not can I, but should I? Understanding what technology does to us, not just what it does for us, is critical. Adopt all new technology with a clear view of the proper degree of its use, as well as whether it leads to a good end. To think clearly about technology, we must ask, what does the good life look like? If the best we can come up with is what I'm doing now, our vision may be too small. When God repairs something, it's better than it was to begin with. The goal of repairing isn't just to zero out destructive influences, it's to embrace the biblical idea of a good life, a life of community, forgiveness, peace, and purpose in a whole new way. We must actively repair our obsession with the new. In modern society, part of our brokenness is that we so easily become obsessed with owning the latest, most popular technology. Technology has a deep effect on us. As Sherry Turkle says, we have to love our technology enough to describe it accurately, and we have to love ourselves enough to confront technology's true effects on us. Repairing this kind of brokenness requires us to be proactive, to stop thinking that newer is automatically better. We need to get in the habit of thinking and evaluating the potential impact before we adopt a new technology. It may not be wise to buy the latest computer or smartphone or upgrade to the newest software just because we can. It's best to pause and ponder our motives. Ask, will this newer technology make things better not just for me but for others? Is it truly a need, or is it just a desire for something new and different? What part of the good life will I gain or lose by possessing it? Discerning how we ought to live in a world of technology comes down to bearing God's image as restorer, renewer, relator, and repairer. These 4 attributes aren't just a checklist. They're a posture toward God, creation, and others. As we make our way through this book, such a posture should help us uncover new ways to think God's thoughts after Him and serve as His ambassadors. Section 5. Technology can be a great good, whether it harnesses energy to ease the pain of human labor or reinvents the idea of money using cell phones. Technology makes life better for nearly everyone. Around the world, people are rising out of poverty. Though there are always ups and downs, over time technology has made possible an unprecedented growth in wealth. Technology is the lever that has enabled the world to move. And yet, as we have seen, technology can also diminish the fervor with which we bear God's image. We'll always face a tension between developing new technologies that express God's redemptive power and avoiding the kind of fascination with them that threatens to turn them into destructive idols. What enables us to keep our balance is remembering who we are in God's story. We aren't here on this planet just to survive. We are God's image bearers. Though we're all broken because of the fall, redemption through Christ is open to us, and we look toward the hope of the resurrection. Meanwhile, however, as Summit's alumni director Paige Goodacre puts it, all is not presently well. Our hearts are turned in on themselves, and technology magnifies our brokenness as well as our created selves. As long as life endures, we'll always need God's grace to attend to the habits of our high-tech hearts. The end.